Let's talk NFL. We previewed both of the NFL's East divisions last week, so we're going to the North this time around. Let's start with the AFC. The Baltimore Ravens won the division with a 10-6 record a year ago. Steelers a half game back of them. The Browns just barely below 500 last year. Bengals were 6-10 at the bottom of the division. Rick, do you see anyone challenging the Ravens' throne this year? And why are the Cleveland Browns going to win the Super Bowl?
First of all, the Browns are Taylor's team. They've been Taylor's team for as long as I've known them. Second of all, there's no way the Ravens are winning the division. They might have a decent defense, but they've lost key players on key leaders on defense. And then offensively, they got probably the worst passing quarterback in the NFL. Very talented, very athletic. I would rather have Blaine Gabbert than Lamar Jackson at quarterback. If I'm trying to throw the ball, yes, I would rather have that. If I'm just running the ball or pretending like I'm going to pass, obviously Jackson's going to do good. They got Ingram there. He'll help with the running game. They'll be a smash-mouth team. But come on, we all saw how Jackson played last year. Baltimore had to change their entire team, their entire offensive scheme for him. There's no way he's going to be a tremendous passer this year. Baltimore is not winning that division. So then you get rid of them. You get rid of Cincinnati because there's too many question marks there. Rookie head coach. A.J. Green, probably their best offensive weapon, gets hurt every season. He's already hurt now. Mixon gets hurt. He hasn't played a full season. He's going to be talented. They should have an offense that will really suit him best because they're going to bring in some L.A. Rams elements to this offense. So then it comes down to Pittsburgh and Cleveland. Track record-wise, Pittsburgh continues to be the best team between those two. In fact, Pittsburgh's dominated Cleveland. Cleveland's won one or two games against Pittsburgh in like the last decade. Cleveland has plenty of talent. But you know what? Here we go again. Until you beat the man, you're not the man. You can't just come in and be like, well, we got these talent, we got these players, we're going to win it all. No. You still got to go to Pittsburgh and beat them. You still got to go to Baltimore and beat them. You've even got to beat the Bengals in state. Okay? And until you do that, please stop with all this Cleveland hype. They're the most overhyped team in the NFL right now, right next to the Raiders. I hate to say this, but I almost feel like by default, I'm going with the Steelers. Juju has proven that he can take Antonio Brown's place in that offense. They've got enough young receivers behind him to still spread out the ball. They got a decent running game. Now that they know Bell's not coming back, they don't have to deal with any of those distractions. Their defense is going to be a little bit improved. Yes, Big Ben's a little older, but he was one of the best quarterbacks statistically last year, top 5 in most categories, even fantasy football, which, for most of us, that means a lot. I'm going with Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh's going to win. I think Cleveland has a shot at getting up there, but until they beat Pittsburgh, I can't take Cleveland. I can't take your team, Taylor. Taylor, I can't do it.
I'm really offended that I have this label now. I think I picked the Browns to win like once last year, and now I'm Browns guy forever. But I'm seeing the Browns at plus 125, which is way too inflated for me to win the division. You got Pittsburgh at plus 190 and Baltimore at plus 260. I'd much rather take Baltimore at that price than Cleveland at plus 125. The Ravens have a pretty easy schedule out of the gates. They get Miami and Arizona weeks 1 and 2, which, there should be guaranteed wins, you would think. Pittsburgh has a tougher schedule. They got New England right off the bat. They play Seattle. San Francisco on the road I don't think is an easy game now. Cincinnati at home's a win. And then you got Baltimore and the Chargers before the bye. It's not inconceivable that they go 1-5 in that stretch or 2-4, which obviously puts them at a disadvantage. I get the hype with Cleveland. There's a lot to like. They were way better last season than they were, have been for the last decade or 2 decades, 3 decades. But just that betting price on them to win the division is way too inflated, I think. I still think they might be the best team on paper, but I don't think this division's very good in the first place. I would still take a more proven team like Baltimore or Pittsburgh at better odds than I would Cleveland with a new coach, with a second-year quarterback, with a wide receiver that's known to get hurt coming in. It's just not the lock that many people seem to view it as. And, I get why they're the favorites, but I'd be more willing to bet on some of these other teams first, just at better odds.
Who you taking?
I'll take Baltimore. I don't really think Pittsburgh has all that much depth. I don't think Big Ben's very good in spite of his inflated stats last season. He's not getting any younger. I think Lamar Jackson's being a little undersold from people. I don't really get why they're at plus 260. I know they didn't win the division by much last year, but that's just really low, I think, for that team. So I would take the value. I'd just take Baltimore.
I tend to agree with Taylor on it because I think that, Rick, you pointed out that Baltimore lost a few key players. Well, so did Pittsburgh. And yeah, we know that they replaced their running back. They didn't really have Bell at all last year. So that's not really a loss compared to last year's team. But their receiving core is a bit thinner. And when you factor in Roethlisberger, there's going to be a time where Ben Roethlisberger just hits that wall. And I know that people have said that with Tom Brady for 7 years at this point. But it will apply to him eventually too. He may just have retired by then, and he may have celebrated his 55th birthday before that happens. But when it comes to Roethlisberger, he is getting up there, and I don't know that he's ever been – I know that statistically last year he had a really good year, but that's more of a bit of an anomaly, a weird peak. And when you thin out the roster a bit around him, I don't know that is going to be feasible again this year. Their running game may actually be better this year just without the headache involved in figuring out when, will, if, will he, why, when, what, where. But I think that every question mark you might have on Baltimore, you could easily apply to Pittsburgh, and Baltimore was a half game better than Pittsburgh last year. Now, if you want to say that Pittsburgh doesn't
except for the key position, Pittsburgh still has a better quarterback. Baltimore had a better defense. Their defense isn't going to be as good.
But their quarterback is as much of a question mark this year as it was last year, and they won the division last year.
By their defense.
So they could do it again.
They lost too many pieces on defense.
I would lean towards Baltimore. The Browns, I won't believe the Browns are even going to be a playoff team until they've clinched. And even then, I probably won't believe it until I see the graphic showing them playing in the wild card weekend.
Exactly.
It would have to be like, hey, welcome to this game in Pittsburgh as the Pittsburgh Steelers host the Cleveland Browns in the first round of the playoffs. That would be the moment I would go, I think they're going to make the playoffs this year. But until that happens.
It's just the odds are so ridiculous. I'd be much more into them if they were the same as the Steelers at plus 190 or something like that. I just don't get where this respect is coming from. Plus 125. I think it's part of, that the division's bad and it's wide open, so it's basically a crapshoot. But just with such an unproven team, I don't see how you can be so bullish on them.
I think it has to be driven by betting money, just people who are trying to get in on Cleveland before they become favored heavily, and it just made them favored heavily. Because there's no real explanation for a franchise that has never been good since its resurgence after re-expansion. Before we get into the NFC, speaking of Cleveland, there's a prop bet available for the Browns. It's kind of unique. Rick wrote an article on this at gamblingsites.org earlier in the week. What kind of facial hair will Browns QB Baker Mayfield sport for week 1 of the regular season? Shortest odds are for mustache only at plus 110, a full beard at plus 175. Other options include clean shaven at plus 300, a horseshoe mustache at plus 700, and a soul patch at plus 3,000. Taylor, do you have a betting favorite or just a style favorite of your own for Baker here?
So I believe he's got mustache right now. That's what he's currently rocking. It seems like most often in the past he's gone with full beard. Last year he had the full beard kind of going. He's had a handlebar. I see a picture of him with a handlebar right here. It might be a college photo. I'm thinking mustache is the favorite just because that's what he has right now. And if he likes it, then he might just keep it up. There's value on mutton chops at plus 2,000, which is probably something that's never been uttered in the history of the English language.
That is one of my favorite phrases I've ever heard. There's value on mutton chops.
Plus 2,000, that pays out pretty nicely if it hits. I'd lean mustache here just because it's what he has right now. Seems logical.
Rick?
I had a blast writing this article and going through the different facial hairstyles that are available. And, I've tried a lot of these different, styles over the years. He has rocked the full beard. He has gone clean shaven. He looks like, as I put in my article, like he hasn't even hit puberty when he's clean shaven. Here's the thing. Once you start messing around with facial hairstyles and trying different things, the last thing you do is go back to clean shaven. There's a chance he can because he's done it before. He can go full beard because he's done it before. But who wants to go full beard in August in Cleveland or anywhere on the East Coast? Too humid, too hot. Full beard would be ridiculous. He's going to mess around something with some kind of mustache. Like I want a Fu Manchu. I want the Hulk Hogan horseshoe. I want the chevron, the 70s porn stash. I would even like to see that on him. I think he can try so many different styles, and he's the kind of guy that will try different styles. You have to go with mustache and hope it's going to be a cool-looking mustache because you know what? There are some styles that it takes a real man to rock. And I think he can do it. I think he can pull it off. Mustache only.
So I do see that as a very reasonable play, especially given that he has a mustache at the moment. I do think, though, that because he has a mustache at the moment, the alternative play is clean shaven with the goal that he would set of growing a full beard over the course of the season, because we do see players who will grow out their beard over the course of 4 or 5 months that will start clean shaven and just never shave during the season. And that is it. You don't go from a mustache to a full beard without going to clean shaven first, or at the very least going down to stubble, because you've got to even it out. You can't have the mustache be poking out an extra, with an extra 3 weeks of growth behind your beard. A little weird. So I would say that clean shaven might actually offer some value at plus 300 because of the fact that if he's going back to the beard, he's got to start clean shaven. So that would be my play on it. I do think the mustache is safer. But very quickly, let's go to the NFC North. The Chicago Bears were the only team to win more than 8 games last season, going 12-4. Minnesota was 8-7-1. The Packers and Lions each won just 6 games. Taylor, who do you see being the biggest threat to the Bears repeating as division champs? And can any of these teams be a true contender to win the NFC?
I think, Chicago's a worthwhile favorite. They proved it last year. Their defense is maybe the best in the entire league. Mitch Trubisky played well. I think he has potential to step forward again in year 3. But of the other teams, I think Minnesota's the most undervalued at plus 210 to win the division. The Green Bay Packers are plus 190. Obviously, Green Bay has the Aaron Rodgers factor, but beyond that, it's just not a very impressive group of talent. Minnesota, I think, is a team that underperformed last year. They had big expectations with Kirk Cousins coming in, didn't live up to them. I think the offense can be better this season. The offensive line's been retooled quite a bit. They still have good talent around him. They have, 2 arguably top 20 receivers in the game alongside him there. So if I'm going to take a flyer beyond Minnesota at plus 210, Chicago at plus 170 is still a worthwhile bet. I'd much rather do that than Cleveland at plus 125 to win their division. So there's decent value all around here. But I would just go either Chicago or Minnesota. I'm not a believer in Green Bay.
And that's coming from a Browns fan.
I can't believe you're putting down your team like that. So,
you all.
Yeah. And Blake Bortles is still your man. So listen, the Bears are the benchmark right now in this division. Packers, you can't trust them on defense right now. They made some moves. They let Clay Matthews go. Like they're going to reshape that defense, come up with a new identity. Offensively, you can't trust their running game. They haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher, and I don't even remember the last time they had one. And Aaron Jones, he's so frustrated for a fantasy owner that it's hard to think he's going to do anything consistently this year, even though people are trying to hype him up now. Outside of Adams at receiver, they have all unproven depth behind him, after him. Graham should do well this year. They got a new coach. There's too many question marks with them. You got Rodgers and a lot of question marks. And usually, if the Bears weren't as good as they were, you can say, well, maybe the Packers because they got Aaron Rodgers. Still, this year you can't. It comes down to the Bears and the Vikings. I picked the Vikings to win, to compete for the NFC Championship last year, and they let me down big time. They had really it all came down to their offensive line. It was horrible. It was one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Could barely rush the ball, couldn't protect the quarterback. They were terrible. With this year, though, like Taylor said, they've improved the O-line. They still have a solid, probably top 10 defense again. They have a shutdown corner who will lock down number one receivers. They got a pass rush. They got a solid defense. Offensively, if that line holds up, they got two great receivers, top 20 easily in Thielen and Diggs. Very serviceable tight end in Rudolph. And they're going to have a dynamic running back as long as he's healthy, and Dalvin Cook, who people are saying he looks great this year. He looks fully healthy and fully recovered. He's a dual threat running back. You add all this together, Minnesota has the pieces. They're worth a flyer. But the safe play is the Bears because they still have arguably the best defense in the NFL. They're not going to take a step back on offense. And if anything, that offense should be even better with players developing, developing. And they should be able to contend for the NFC title this year. They made the playoffs. They made a good run last year. They're going to be better, more consistency. Khalil Mack on that defense is ferocious. Like, you have to go Dub Bears for this bet and flyer on the Vikings. And I do believe the Bears could contend with the Saints, the Rams, and whoever comes out of the NFC East to win the NFC.
I mean, I agree with both of you. You guys pretty much said it all. I do think that the Vikings have a shot. I think that they're probably more of a wild card team, but might be worth a flyer if you have more confidence in them, especially after last year's disappointment. But the Bears are the best chance for a team from that division to contend for a spot in the Super Bowl. So I think the Bears are the safer play, but if you wanted to pick the Vikings, if you really had faith that they were going to bounce back and that the expectations they had a year ago were going to be realized this year, wouldn't stop you on it.
I hope you enjoyed that segment from the Odds On Favorites podcast. If you did, there's plenty more where that came from. Click on the link on your screen now to be taken to the complete podcast from this week, or check out the channel to find the other individual segments. And make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for plenty more sports and sports betting picks, tips, and how-to guides.